Hello, my name is Priscilla Johnson and I am the Life Enrichment Coordinator for Independent Residents here at Glacier Hills. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Life in the Hills talk show. We are so pleased this afternoon to have Gabby VanderMolen with us. Gabby is the volunteer coordinator and the editor of Life in the Hills. So Gabby, welcome to our little talk show here. The first thing we want to mention, you may notice that neither of us is wearing our masks, which we wear very diligently. We have this wonderful clear partition between us. So we are 6 feet apart and we are perfectly safe. So we just wanted to let you know that. So once again, welcome to the talk show, and we're just delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'm excited to be here. It was a treat to be invited.
Absolutely. Well, many of you may know that, or maybe you don't know, that Gabby and I shared an office pre-COVID. We shared an office for 5 years. So we really got to know each other, and we had a lot of fun. Probably, we should have been doing work when we were talking, but it was
lots done.
No. But anyway, we got to know each other. We had a very good time. We also collaborated on a lot of fun projects, didn't we?
Yes, you were a great roomie.
Yeah, it was very handy. It was very handy. So tell me about, Gabby, what are volunteers doing these days? How are you keeping in touch with them?
Well, I got to tell you, it was really hard when everything shut down and volunteers were no longer able to come to campus, and many of them were keeping safe in their own homes. Remember, the whole state was staying safe at home.
Absolutely.
And we have found ways for some volunteers to participate remotely. In fact, I have a team of volunteers who help proofread Life in the Hills.
Nice.
And we have some volunteers who have helped with things like the Ideas and Images publication, different types of projects that they've done remotely, creating GHTV content.
Oh yeah.
And helping with connected living and the like. So there are some remote volunteer opportunities. We also had a huge outpouring in the beginning of volunteers making cards and signs and thanks to the heroes and posters for our staff and for our residents, and that was really meaningful too. These days, I periodically send out an email to my volunteers to keep them a little bit in the loop, and then also we had the volunteer views, which residents received a copy of that back in December, and that went out, of course, to volunteers as well. And now they've been invited to view the volunteer awards video.
I was going to mention that.
Yes.
Because I remember that as we were shutting down, was just when you were starting to plan your whole big, beautiful dinner event, and we had already had one meeting about that. And then everything went junk like this. So tell us about how you were able to facilitate that online.
Oh, it was heartbreaking to not be able to have that special party that we do every year and to spend that time with the volunteers. But of course, it just couldn't be. And so, and it's so funny because at first I thought, oh, well, by April, of course, we'll be able to still have that. It'll be open by then.
Right.
But then, oh no, that didn't happen. Oh, well then this summer for sure we'll be able to do it, summer 2020, because by then this will all be over and maybe we'll have it outside. And then, and then it became the reality struck.
It's kind of been a stretch.
Yes.
Yeah.
So instead we had the award recipients who had already been notified that they had won the awards. We had the award winners come in one at a time for mostly outdoors, sometimes by Zoom, award presentations, and so we were able to honor them and create a video with the help of a volunteer who this is her passion is creating video, and so she had all the right software and put together this really beautiful piece that tells a story of our volunteers here at Glacier Hills.
Oh, that's really wonderful. That's a lot of work for you, but I know that the volunteers really, really appreciate that. some of our residents may not know that before Gabby was the volunteer coordinator, I was actually the volunteer coordinator. And then I left for a while, and Gabby came on board, and then I came back. So it's been just a wonderful transition, and really heartwarming for me to see how the volunteer program has just blossomed. How many volunteers did you have sort of on a weekly basis, or that were regular volunteers before all of this shut down?
So we had 300 volunteers on our
Roster?
active
Yeah.
active volunteers
roster.
on our
Wow.
roster, and you know, some of them were choirs and some of them were
Right.
individuals, but it's you know, we sure miss them. And,
I'm sure.
And I do believe that once we begin to reopen, there'll be a lot of rebuilding of, you know, re-cementing those relationships, and then also building new ones.
Well, it sounds like you've done a great job of keeping them engaged so far, so that's wonderful. I'm just wondering now if we can talk a little bit about your other role as editor of Life in the Hills. And Life in the Hills is a publication which all of you receive 3 times a week, most of the time. And it gives very accurate, updated information, you know, in real time as far as what's going on campus. Many of you who live in the villas are not able to come into the main building frequently, and so I think this Life in the Hills is incredibly important for villa residents. And also our apartment residents, but even more importantly is family members. So talk about how that new dimension to your job began.
Well, back in late 2019,
Yeah.
Dale Berry, the then interim president, said, let's start a newsletter twice a month to prepare for any renovations, that keep residents informed about the changes that might be coming with any new renovations. So we wanted to establish this newsletter so people would see it as a place to go for information. And so we started this in December and in January, and then in late February, everything changed. And I remember I just published a newsletter, and so it was like, okay. But then I realized, wait a minute, I need to do a special edition because people don't know where to find their dinner, people don't know how to get in and out of the building, people don't.
Right.
And so I just started doing this, and certainly I wasn't managing volunteers as much, so I could focus on helping with communications role. And yes, it's been, I think that some of the things that I love most about writing the newsletter is helping keep people informed about what's happening at Glacier Hills and how to take advantage of the resources that are here and how to stay safe during this time. But I've also really enjoyed the opportunity for residents to connect a little bit with each other through the newsletter. Even though everyone was siloed into their own apartments, they could write a poem and publish it and then read their neighbors.
I've really enjoyed some of those.
Yeah, or their stories, or sharing their anniversaries, or just things like that I've really enjoyed being a part of as well. And yes, I think family members really watch that COVID update.
Of course they do.
Like an eagle eye, but also just getting a feel for, hey, what's going on at Glacier Hills, and especially they're so separated from their loved ones right now, that to be able to see what's going on here, I think helps them as well. So it's been I've been honored to be able to play that role.
Right. Wonderful. And so do you think that after COVID is over, you will just go back to it, the publication will still continue, you think, and then you'll go back to giving updates about the renovations that are happening across campus?
Yes, I think that we'll eventually, once life goes back to normal, we won't need a 3 times a week newsletter. It'll be fine to have it twice a month or whatever we decide, and then people can still stay connected with what's going on, what big changes on campus, and also share an opportunity for residents to share
Sure.
a little bit with each other, but it
Sure.
won't be quite, residents will be able to find out what's going on when they're in the dining room or at the concert or at the, they won't need to
It'll
get
be
all their
wonderful.
news. They'll be at meetings with, resident meetings. They won't need to hear everything through a newsletter. So I'll be excited to be able to work with the volunteers again.
Of course.
Once we're able to,
So will I.
bring them back. Yeah.
I'll be happy to do that too.
Right.
So COVID has, it's turned everything and everyone upside down and on their ear. And I know, personally speaking, things have really changed. We have daughters who have moved out of the house and, we can't see them as often, and one is far away. Talk about your family a little bit, and I know you have 3 teenagers. Is that right?
That's right.
3 teenagers. So how is that all going?
So I feel a little bit fortunate that that my kids are just kind of at that sweet spot, right? They're not little kids and struggling with the Zooming to school, and they're not, but they're still under my roof, right? I know they're safe and where they are, and so I feel very fortunate that they're the ages that they are during this difficult time. But at the same time, they're missing a lot. My husband Bill and I, we have a daughter Abigail, she's 17, our son Adam is 16, and our youngest Andrew is 14. And they all attend Huron High School, Ann Arbor Public Schools, and everything's virtual right now. And that has been, it's really hard to have your senior year, captain of the synchronized swim team, and they're Zooming. Tonight's their first time to have an actual in-person training for her sport. They've just been Zooming till now, so which is, very hard to do with anything swimming.
Right. How do you do that?
The bathtub? No.
Yeah.
So, but it's, not the senior year I had envisioned, and I had all their little lives. I thought there's going to be one year when they're all in high school together, and I was looking forward to that, and they'd be going to basketball games together, and well, they sure spent a lot of time together.
Well said.
So, and then of course my freshman year, he's never even really walked the campus, and so that's just been a really different time, and school by Zoom is really not the same. My daughter was doing her biology project. She had to go out and dig up roly-polies from the yard because that was their lab. She needed something alive, and so roly-polies, and the boys in their engineering class, it's instead of using 3D printers, well, it's more like marshmallows and toothpicks, and
whatever you have on hand.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cereal boxes. So they are learning, but they're definitely have lost quite a bit this year. So but and my husband, he works from home. He works for General Motors in the Rensen, and they have shut nobody goes into work until June
Well, I just
30th.
want to thank you, Gabby, so much for joining us today, and we're looking to more editions of Life in the Hills. So have a good afternoon. Hello everyone, my name is Priscilla Johnson. I'm the Life Enrichment Coordinator for Independent Residents here at Glacier Hills. It's a beautiful sunny day here. It's hard to believe that it's actually something like 15 degrees outside. But here in our lovely little studio, I am so pleased to be joined by Paul Bourassa. Paul is in the Environmental Services Department here at Glacier Hills. And we're so happy to have him here to chat with just a little bit, to get some of his thoughts on the pandemic and just to see what he's been up to. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here. It's nice to sit down.
Well, you've been here for some time now. How many years has it been since
It's about 12 and a half years. I started as a housekeeper, did that for 4 months, and then I've been a custodian for over 12 years now.
Oh, very good. And have you worked across the campus? Because I know now you're primarily in the Meadows, aren't you?
No, she put me in the Meadows, and that's where I've been.
Okay.
I mean, we do things as needed anywhere she sends us.
Yes.
And I work every other weekend, which is all over the campus.
Well,
but-
that's a blessing to me, because when I'm here, I also, you know, I have some activities and I'm starting movies and things. And Paul is just wonderful about looking at the board and seeing where I have not put in a function request, for instance, and saying, I just have a question. So
Well,
he's definitely a partner in crime, and I really appreciate it.
I haven't had to do that for a long time.
No, there haven't been too many activities.
Not for a while.
That's right. So, Paul, I just wanted to ask you, if anyone knows dialects, we can all recognize that you are from the far east, from the great state of Maine.
Yeah, I am from the state of Maine, but I'm French Canadian. You'd think I would have more of a French aspect to my language, but my parents told me I spoke French when I was 2 years old, and I have no memory of it because we moved to a neighborhood where all the kids spoke English.
I see.
And then I lost it. I completely lost it.
Huh. There are a lot of French Canadians in Maine, aren't there?
It's like, they used to say it was like 40% of the population.
That is so interesting.
But it's only about 1.3 million people in the whole state, so it's not huge.
Right.
But a lot of people came from Quebec mostly when the mills were starting up and
I see.
getting going.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was one of them. He was a carpenter, and they came in a wagon, and,
Wow.
and he built houses for many years. So.
Wow. Well, I also have ties to Maine. My dad was born in Maine and grew up on a farm there. And when you get him together with his cousins and so forth, boy, does he fall into that dialect just like that. It's really interesting to watch.
I'm not aware that I even have one, but people tell me I do. So.
Yeah.
Certain words anyway. But.
And of course, the other connection that I have to Maine is our one daughter is working on a farm there.
Yeah, that's great.
And she's enjoying it very much. So tell us, Paul, how did you come 900 miles from Maine? How did you arrive in Michigan?
Well, it was kind of reluctantly at first anyway. My mother and I were the only ones left of the family in Maine. I've got two older sisters, and they were both in the Midwest. My sister Jean's near Pittsburgh, and my sister Louise is in Ann Arbor, and had been here for many years. And as my mother got older and older, we were foreseeing that she was going to need help at some point. And I was living with her, but when I was at work, she was alone. So when she was about 90 years old, my sisters strongly started suggesting that I move, that we both move just to the Midwest, either, some place near them or in between, just so we wouldn't be so far away. Because they would come at least once a year, but we weren't seeing any of their family because, it's not easy to go that far.
Right.
So I had a few concerns. I wasn't sure we'd be able to sell our house. The economy was quite depressed in our town. So I started thinking about, this was my parents' home that they'd been in almost 50 years. And my father, who died some years ago, had a lot of stuff in the basement and the attic and everywhere. And I thought, well, it's going to take months just to get rid of that. So I thought, well, we'll start doing that. So we kind of started, and then things just happened. We were able to kind of orderly get rid of things and prepare for the move, and the house sold.
Wow.
In the spring, almost 13 years ago. And we were delighted and surprised. It was close to the price we wanted.
Nice.
And we just barely had time to get everything done and move. And my mother, who was 90 at the time, was thrilled because she got to see many more of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. and even a great-great-grandchildren eventually. So she had a good 7 years here before she passed. But,
Oh, that's wonderful. That
Yeah.
sounds like it was, meant to be.
it was a lot of prayer involved on
Yeah.
all sides. And,
We're all good with prayer.
And the
Yeah.
timing was, it just worked out. You
Oh.
couldn't have asked for better, so.
Oh, that's just wonderful. So in your home in Maine, were you in an area where you were able to have a garden?
Oh yeah, my father loved to garden. I mean, his father had always had a garden. They raised food to eat.
I see.
It was a big part of the family's food budget for the year. So my father wanted one and had bought a piece of land with that in mind. With planting trees and. He had a spot picked out, and I think it started as a Girl Scout merit badge for my sisters, but he quickly took over, and then it never stopped, So it was for a long time just a garden, and then he finally, as the family was moving off, he planted high bush blueberries.
Oh.
Which at the time the University of Maine told him, you should have put the low bush because the high bush don't grow in Maine, but they grew. And eventually, out of 10 plants, we were getting 100 quarts a year, if we kept the birds off them, which we did. But
Yeah.
we ended up building a cage around the whole thing. But that was delightful. And once they were established, the picking was the hard part, and that's no great burden.
Right.
You get to eat a few while you're doing that. So.
Sounds delicious.
That was probably the hardest thing to leave in Maine, actually.
Yeah. I know that you have this gardening background, and I'm so glad you shared that with our audience. And so now, are your current living circumstances such that you can also have a garden?
It's tight because I'm in a condo. So there's a little patio and, just little spaces for flowers and things, really, but I'm exploiting it as much as I can. And I've got a lot of nieces and nephews, so some of them are gardening now.
Oh,
so
very
I'm
good.
hoping to get involved with some of their activities.
That's wonderful.
And
I think we've also talked about that you are from the town where the very famous seed company, Johnny's Seed Company, is located.
Johnny's Selected Seed.
Johnny's Selected
They
Seed.
started in northern Maine, actually, but they moved to central Maine because you can just grow more seeds in central Maine. It's a more favorable zone. And they have a lot of property in Albion, Maine, which is some miles from me. But I can't remember how many years ago they bought a warehouse in Winslow, the town where I lived, and set up their headquarters there. So if you get their catalog, it says Winslow, Maine now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Paul and I talk a lot about gardening because I have just gotten into gardening, as you know, and so I'm asking him all sorts of questions, and then I email my daughter in Maine about gardening. So you can tell we're all just a little bit fried from being inside because we're talking about gardening so much.
I don't care. Every winter in Maine, especially, once you got the seed catalogs, that's all you would look at for a month or so and make plans.
Exactly.
And it's even worse now because.
So we're definitely looking forward to the sun being out to
spring.
The spring, and where we can be out and walking and so forth. Is there one thing in particular that, other than the gardening and being outside, that you're looking forward to in this sort of, as we're kind of hoping for a post-COVID era, sooner rather than later?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I have a lot of extended family here, but since this started, we've all been so cautious. Basically, I'm just seeing my sister, who is across the street, and a very few other people, and only at a distance and outside, which was pretty good in the summer, but a lot more difficult lately. Although we did get together around New Year's at one of my nephews, who has a nice piece of property, and it wasn't too cold, and he had built
Paul, I know that
bonfires.
you have told me this wonderful story about some birds in your around your condo.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it might be of interest to our viewers. So
Oh,
would you tell
sure.
your swan story, please?
Yeah, this is only part one, I think.
Part one.
At least
Oh,
I'm
wow.
hoping. Well, since I've been a little boy, I was always interested in birds. I remember my first golden book of birds that I memorized and just marveled over. Because my father loved them too, and we shared that. But after moving here, there are more birds here than in Maine, for one thing. But in particular, where I live at Getty's Lake, there are 3 ponds, and there are trumpeter swans there that nest every year. And normally they nest some distance from where I live, but last year, it's a new pair of swans, so they were a little inexperienced maybe, but for some reason, the first nest failed. So I come in from my garage one day, and it's getting dark, and I look on the patio, and I see these 2 swans out there, and I've seen them before close up. Because one of the neighbors used to feed them, so they come begging at whenever they see light or any movement. But I was a little surprised to see them when it was getting dark, because usually they go off on the pond in the evening. But I realized after a minute that they were building a nest. I had put some straw down as a mulch for my plants, and they were piling it up along with many of the plants and making a nest. And my first reaction was, oh no. But after I found out that their first nest had been destroyed and stuff, I thought, well, fine, they can stay. So I thought it was getting late in the season. Usually they nest around Mother's Day, or they lay the eggs then, actually, and they incubate and they hatch around Father's Day. So this was May 18th, I think. So I thought, well, okay, they'll just make a second nest and nothing much will happen this year. So I bought them some more straw. They made a really nice nest, and the females sat there, and they'd go off and feed during the day and stuff. So I thought, well, great, maybe they'll come back next year and really do something. But then we saw an egg, and then another one. So apparently she had laid, we figured out finally, 4 eggs. So then we got all excited, although my neighbors who have more knowledge and experience with the swans said, well, it's getting late in the season. I hope they have time to raise the young and get them able to fly. It's a big bird. So we waited, and the females started incubating, and that usually takes, 28 or 30 days or more. It takes a long time, but it finally kept going, and we started wondering, because it went past the time. So we got in touch with some experts, and they said, well, if she's been sitting on them that long, they're probably infertile, and you should remove them, because she will abandon them eventually, but she doesn't feed much while she's incubating, so she's getting weaker.
Yeah.
So it would be better to remove them. So I thought, oh, how are we going to do that? So they're quite defensive, and I mean, just walking by, I'd been hissed at a bit, So occasionally she would leave and go off on the pond for a few minutes. So when I had a day off one day, I had my neighbors watching from their condo next door to make sure the swans weren't near, and I snuck out and took the eggs. And I broke them open later. They were all infertile.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, she came back, and I thought she'd be real upset, but she kind of just looked around, and then she went back out and started really eating.
Oh.
So that was for the best. But we're hoping this year that they'll actually start early enough.
So we'll have to follow up with part 2.
Oh yeah, I'm really
That'll be
anxious
part
to
2.
see what happens.
Yeah.
Really anxious.
Oh, it's
I mean, there's
wonderful
no
story.
guarantee they'll even come back. They're pretty long-lived, but accidents happen and stuff. You never
Right.
know. But
Well, hopefully.
and hopefully they'll come to the same spot. There's no guarantee of that either. But I think it's likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something more to look forward to in the
Oh
springtime.
yeah. I'm anxious. I mean, once they hatch, they're going to leave. So it's not like I'll be able to watch a little nest full of chicks for more than a
That's
day or
true.
two.
Yeah.
But at least, you know, you'll see the whole process through, and I'll get my patio back by Father's Day instead of waiting till,
Oh.
you know, into July.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll look forward to part 2. Maybe we'll have you back in the fall and see how it all turned out.
I hope it's good news, yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.